Have you ever gone into a restaurant and noticed that someone didn't leave a tip for their waiter because they got frustrated with mistakes made on their meal? Or maybe you're the one who has done it? Or maybe you believe that you shouldn't tip in general? I'm an avid customer in the restaurant business. I've had my fair share of waiters either making a mistake or the kitchen messing up my meal. But I feel that it is always important to tip them. A saying is, if you don't feel like tipping, you shouldn't be going out to eat. Many people blame the waiter for all the mistakes on their meal and decide not to tip them, even though it may not be their mistake. Waiters make an average of $2.13 an hour for the wage in the US. The rest of their income comes from tips of their customers, so it is vital that they get tipped from others so they are able to make a living. So I believe that tipping should be mandatory in restaurants. But several people believe that if they didn't like the service, they shouldn't tip. That's not what you should do. Tipping is always the right way to go. So either if you're against tipping or for it, I hope to persuade you to tip. During this speech, you should learn that tipping allows a server to make a living as well as knowing that they did a good job and that not all the mistakes made were their fault. I hope to have done my job to give you real life examples of why I believe tipping should be mandatory. So, the first thing all customers should realize is that all waiters in the US make a low minimum wage. Many struggle just to even make a living to pay their bills. From an article in Mother Jones, 23-year-old Anna Hovland worked in a waitressing job earlier this year to make ends meet. Her restaurant in Washington, D.C. paid her the local minimum wage for tipped workers, $2.77 an hour, which meant after taxes, her paycheck was usually zero. Her tips, never dependable, range from $20 to $200 a shift. She says, in a city as expensive as DC, I've been able to make ends meet by the skin of my teeth. Sometimes it'll only be in the last week or two of a month that I realize I made enough money to pay the bills. Lots of people are servers when they are in college, but many of them other people make comments like, why don't they get a real job if they make so little? But what they don't realize is that they're striving to pay for college to get that real job and being a server is the only way they find a job without a degree. I found this equation from the Odyssey that really explains how servers are trying to get a real job. Server equals money for college, which equals college degree, which equals real job. So, just like you and me, we all need to be able to make a living. Without tipping the waiter, they're not being able to make a living as well. The saying goes, if you can't afford a tip, then you can't afford to eat out. Another instance that people don't realize when they leave a tip, or they don't leave a tip, is that not every mistake made is the waiter's fault. Many times we go into a restaurant, we order our food, we receive it, and it turns out cold or undercooked. Then we turn to the waiter and get upset at them even though they didn't even make the food. It was the kitchen that messed up the meal. But you then feel that you need to give the waiter a lowball tip because your food was cold. From an article, A Waiter Speaks Out, 10 Ways You Can Avoid Being That Customer, it informs us that people often blame everything in the restaurant on their server. I've seen people not tip because they've had to wait for so long to get a table. That's punishing the server for something they can't even control. If the food comes out wrong, guess what? Your server isn't the cook. The cook is the cook. You don't tip the cook, you tip the server for their service. They also encourage us that no matter how the service was, you should probably leave something. Did the food end up on your table? Well, that's at least a couple bucks right there. You don't have to leave a big tip every time, and it's okay to leave a lower tip than average when the service was bad. Leaving nothing, on the other hand, is just awful. Unless the waiter spit in your food, you owe them a tip. If you're willing to pay full price for the food, don't skip on the tip. The last point I want to make is that most individuals like to reward the server for their good service. It is a kind gesture for a job well done. When servers don't get tipped, they feel as if they have failed the customer and didn't do their job the best. They can easily get discouraged, which can affect them mentally. So, award your server as they should be. It doesn't mean that you have to give them a 20% tip every time, but you should always give them something. I do give better tips for people I have a connection with, and I think that really serve the table well. I love to be able to put a smile on anyone's day. In closing, I believe that tipping should be mandatory. The Odyssey sums it up for us. Even if your order was messed up, the service was slow, or all your plates didn't come out on time, you still tip. The moral of the story is tipping is not an option, it's a requirement. Tip as your life depends on it, because even if that's not the case for you, it may be for your waitress. I hope after this, you believe that tipping should be mandatory. Tipping allows the server to make a living, know that they did a good job, and that they weren't getting blamed for certain mistakes they didn't make. Everyone deserves to know that they are appreciated, so let your server know that too.